Iceland, to some the most beautiful country in the world. Let's explore what lies in this strange little island that looks like it's located on completely another planet. Iceland has lifted its travel ban a few days ago, and tourists are allowed to the country again. We have this great opportunity to see Iceland almost tourist-free, which hasn't happened in years. I am Lex Universe, and this is Iceland, post-corona.
Hello Internet, welcome to Lex Universe. So let's talk about Iceland. This video is kind of a conclusion of my previous videos from my trip to Iceland. If you haven't seen them, you can check them out in the upper right corner. And now let's dive in. So in this video, I will talk about what you should expect if you're traveling to Iceland, also what you should be prepared for, any basic information from the travel's point that you might find handy, and I will also dedicate a part of the video talking about the COVID-19 pandemic in Iceland and how to travel there during this time period. So if you are interested in any of that, then stay tuned. Let's dive in. Alright, so let's start with the basics. I guess you already know this, but Iceland is located in the middle of the North Atlantic Ocean. Basically, you have two options how to get there. You can fly or you can get a boat, but I will talk about it later. The capital city of Iceland is Reykjavik, which will be your gateway to Iceland, I guess, in most of cases. There is a very low population density in Iceland. The whole country has around 360,000 inhabitants, so also understand that most of them live in Reykjavik, so if you travel further from Reykjavik, you have a very good chance that you will not encounter living, so especially now when there are no tourists. The official language of Iceland is Icelandic. It's a very old Germanic language, which is not very similar to any living language. You can compare it a little bit to Faroese, but I don't suppose any of you speak it or even know that it's a language. It's actually quite similar to the Old Norse language, the so-called language of the Vikings. Most of the people in Iceland speak English, that's true. I haven't encountered anyone who wouldn't speak English. Saying that, a lot of the signs in Reykjavik are actually not in English, they're only in Icelandic, so... But we live in the 21st century, and I'm sure that you have some Google Translator in your phone, so that's not a big issue. And on the other hand, Icelandic people are really helpful, so if you ask someone the direction or whatever you need to know, I believe they will help you. The official currency of Iceland is Icelandic krona. It's very unusual to pay by cash. In most cases, they will just offer you the card terminal in the first place. I actually withdrew like 10,000 Icelandic krona when I arrived, and I had quite difficulties to actually spend them. At this moment, you can exchange 1,000 Icelandic krona for around 6.3 euro. Just if you're traveling in the future, check out the current exchange rate for the Icelandic krona. This can be really outdated really soon. So let's talk a little bit how to get to Iceland. There are basically two ways how to get to Iceland. You can either take a plane or take a boat. Now, let's get the boats out of the way very quickly because, I mean, they're not very useful. You can take a ferry from Denmark to Iceland for like 3,000 euro. And yeah, I don't know why would you want to do that unless you want to like bring your own car, which, whatever, it's your problem. But for most people, you will arrive by plane. There's only one international airport in Iceland, and that's Keflavik International Airport. Okay, now that you're at the airport, you will want to get to the city because it's located like 50 kilometers from the downtown Reykjavik. So there are several options. You can rent a car, which is the approach that most people do, because it will be really handy when you travel around Iceland. On the other hand, if you're a solo traveler, this can be really pricey, so there is a possibility to go by public transportation. The company Reykjavik Excursions has this flybus line that goes from Keflavik Airport to Reykjavik and vice versa. They will drop you off on the BSI bus terminal in Reykjavik, but they also offer a drop-off at selected destination most notably at hotels. So if you don't want to walk from the BSI, you have this possibility. It costs around 3,000 Icelandic krona one way, or 5.5 thousand round trip, and it takes about 40 to 50 minutes depending on the traffic. Now comes the part where I will talk a little bit about the current situation there. So if you're watching this from the future and the COVID-19 pandemic is just bad nightmare that nobody cares about, then good for you. I really envy you, and you can skip to this time of the video and continue with Iceland in general. But right now, there are some things that you have to do first. First of all, you will have to go to visit.covid.is, where you will have to register. They will need some of your personal information, also information about your flight and about your stay in Iceland. You will receive a barcode that you have to print out or have somewhere in your phone. And this will be really important because there is currently the need to get the COVID-19 test at the airport. It used to be for free in the beginning for like 2 weeks, but now it costs 15,000 Icelandic krona, and you will have to pay it, and you will have to go through the test if you come to Iceland. Now, it is possible that this will be lifted in some time in the future, but I don't really believe that because there are currently no active cases of COVID-19 on Iceland, and I believe they want to keep it that way, so that's kind of a thing. In this case, they will just proceed with the test on the airport, then you will go to the immigration, and everything is okay. You will receive the results of the test within like 12 hours. And in the meantime, you can just go to your hotel, do whatever you want. You should just avoid big crowds of people, and also you shouldn't leave Reykjavik probably, because in case you're positive, you will have to go to some other examinations to the hospital. So keep it in mind. Now, speaking of COVID in Iceland, like I said, they have no active cases, so you don't have to wear a face mask anywhere. There are sanitizers. Actually, I was kind of surprised on the airport where they didn't let me into the duty free without sanitizing my hand and using the one-time gloves. But otherwise, nowhere in Reykjavik or nowhere on Iceland you need to wear face masks. Let's talk about Iceland. So you're already there, so you want to get around. Now, your first option, in which most people go for, is to rent a car. There are plenty of car rentals directly at the airport and in Reykjavik and basically all around the country. You can rent a normal car, but if you're traveling somewhere to the highlands, to the center of the island, it's really recommended to have 4x4 because the roads are really awful there. If you're traveling solo like me, then renting a car is really a very expensive option. So what you can do instead, you can rely on public transportation. There are some buses that go all around Iceland, but also remember, I mean, Iceland looks quite small, but getting around is really time consuming. There are some direct buses that go to the closer towns around Reykjavik, but if you want to travel to the West Fjords or to the far east of the island, you cannot do that within one day, so just keep it in mind. The more convenient way how to get around is to actually fly. The domestic flights are, I mean, they are expensive, but not as expensive as you would expect. Saying that, these flights are not operated from the Keflavik airport, but there is the Reykjavik city airport really close to downtown, where you will depart from. If you want to travel in the capital area, there is quite good public transportation coverage. Also, if you're traveling solo and you want to visit many of these natural wonders, it's a really good idea to get some organized tours. They're not really that expensive as I thought. Most of them really cost about 40 euro per one-day trip. For me personally, I have a very good experience with Bus Travel Iceland, but there are others like Reykjavik Excursions or Elding. Okay, when we stay in Reykjavik for a while, getting around is very simple. It's really walkable. It's not a very big city, especially downtown. So if you want to get around Reykjavik, there's this electric scooter sharing service called Hop. You will just download the app and you can rent a electric scooter to get around. Actually, I realized that many people in Reykjavik do that, so be one of them and do that too. Now, one good tip if you're traveling around Iceland is get good clothes and also get a very good raincoat. We were in the glacial lagoon and it was raining like 1 hour straight, and I have never felt so uncomfortable in my life. So really get a good jacket, get a good raincoat, get good shoes. It's also very helpful because most of the places are really outdoors, so I mean leave your flip-flops at home. Alright, so let's talk about dining. Like the first thing that I will have to get out of the room is it's really expensive. If you're coming to Iceland on a budget, then prepare not to be really dining out in restaurants, because I mean it's okay to go for a meal or two, but doing this every day it will get really expensive really quickly. So just keep it in mind. You can get this kind of an infamous dish on Iceland. It's called fermented shark. I haven't tried it. I don't eat meat, but from what I heard, it smells really like I don't know, and it doesn't really taste that well. So if you want to try something special, then you can try the fermented shark. Also, Iceland is one of the few countries in the world where whale hunting is not illegal, so you can get a whale, but the whole world is against it, so why shouldn't you do that? Speaking of eating and drinking, don't bother buying bottled water. The tap water is extremely drinkable. Now, speaking of drinking, let's talk alcohol. First of all, if you want to go out for a drink, you should consider going out during the happy hours. This is very famous in Reykjavik or in Iceland in general. Many of the bars have these happy hours where drinks are a lot more affordable, a lot cheaper for like 50% of price, which you should definitely take advantage of because they're really expensive otherwise. They're really expensive even during happy hours, but if you want to have this experience of Iceland, then do it during this time. The beer costs there around 800 krona during happy hours, but if you don't come during happy hours, it can be like really twice as expensive, even more. So keep it in mind. Like what most people on Iceland do when they want to get wasted, they actually drink at home. Then they go to a bar or to a club or whatever. Now, speaking about drinking at home, one thing that you should keep in mind: you cannot buy alcohol in the supermarkets. There are specific shops for buying alcohol. They're called Vimbutin, and if you find these, you can buy alcohol there. Just keep in mind they close quite early and there are not so many of them in Reykjavik. There is one in downtown Reykjavik, so you shouldn't have a problem, but if you decide to buy some at 8 o'clock, you will be very surprised. Another option is, of course, once you come to Iceland, you can buy some alcohol in the duty-free shops and then bring it with you. By the way, one funny thing, beer was actually illegal on Iceland until 1989. Which is kind of interesting. It was a very good year for Europe, you know. I was born. The Berlin Wall fell. Beer on Iceland was no longer prohibited. A very good year, I guess. I have to mention prices on Iceland because that's one thing that's very talked about whenever you mention Iceland. Okay, first of all, Iceland is expensive. I mean, if you compare it to the rest of the world, I haven't been to many places that were more expensive than Iceland. In general, I spent a lot of money there. I mean, it was more expensive in my 2 weeks trip to the Southeastern Asia. But I was expecting the worst, and I didn't get it. But really, it was expensive, but not as much as I expected. So let's talk about accommodation. I got one single room for 6 nights for like 75 Icelandic krona. Which, I mean, it's not cheap, but I had more expensive accommodations, so that's kind of reassuring. See, the thing is, after the corona crisis, like I said, the price, the value of the Icelandic krona dropped significantly. So now everything is like twice as cheap as it was, I don't know, half a year ago, which is really one of the reasons why you should come to Iceland right now, as soon as possible, because if you want to travel on the budget, if you come in a year when the price will rise again, it will be a lot more expensive. So that's one of the things. But again, it actually it depends on what you want to do. I'll spend a lot of money in bars and stuff like that. Also, I spend a lot of money for the tours because I mean, if you travel in more people and you rent a car, then getting around Iceland is actually quite affordable. I mean, renting of a car is not cheap, but if it's 4 of you, then that's kind of reasonable price, and most of the natural wonders are actually for free, so you don't have to worry about that. And so in the end, it really depends who you are, how you want to travel, and what you want to do there. Also, I spent quite a lot of money in bars and restaurants, which I didn't have to. So if you don't want to do that, you don't have to do that, and you can really travel Iceland on the budget. Okay, now remains the one question which I'm sure you're wondering, and that's when to visit Iceland. And honestly, to this, I don't have an answer to that. It really depends on what you want to see, what you want to do there, and what are your expectations. I will not tell you when to visit, but I will tell you the advantages of all the seasons, or at least the main 2 seasons, summer and winter. If you want to come in summer, then the largest advantage is that you will have a lot of daylight. I mean, I was there during the summer solstice, and really there was a daylight 21 hours a day. So with that comes actually the disadvantage, because you cannot see the northern lights, which is one of the great things about Iceland. I mean, you need darkness for that, and you will not just get it in summer. Also, like, the temperatures are higher in summer. It's around 15 degrees Celsius. Very cool, especially if you want to escape from the scorching temperatures in Europe or the USA, then you can go to Iceland. Also, if you come in summer, you have a much bigger variety on what you can do and what you can visit. Many of the roads are actually closed in winter, and you cannot get to the whole central part of Iceland, to the highlands. So if you want to see that, you should come in summer. Now, advantages of traveling in winter is, well, you can see the northern lights. That's the biggest advantage, of course. Basically, that's one of the main reasons why people come there in winter. But there are others. There is a lot less tourists on Iceland during winter. And also, if you want to go to the Blue Lagoon, it's much more, I guess it's a lot more enjoyable when you're there in winter, because then all the steam from the lagoon is going up. It must be really, really nice experience. Also, the prices are generally lower off season, so that's also one of the good points about the winter. And also, from what I heard, if you want to see orcas in the bay, then you have a bigger chance to see them in winter, although you have quite small chance all year long, so it depends. So generally, it really depends on who you are and what you want. But definitely, Iceland is amazing all year long, so pick your date and just go. I will just really shortly talk about the things that you can see on Iceland. I will not go into details. If you're interested in that, you can check the previous videos in this series. I've visited many of these places. I gave there a lot of information about them, so if you're interested, then go check it all out. I believe it will help you a lot. So that's Iceland. I hope I haven't forgotten anything. I hope you found this video helpful. If you have any more points, just leave them in the comments below. If you have any questions, just ask them. I will try to respond to them. And I hope you enjoyed this video. If you did, please give me a like, subscribe to my channel, check out my other social media, and see you in the next video. We're going to Italy.